Niembeki had always believed her marriage was built on love and respect. She was the kind of woman who turned heads at every event, graceful, calm, and loyal. Her husband, Tayo Mbeki, was one of the most powerful businessmen in Johannesburg, and together they looked like the perfect couple. But that illusion shattered one night after a charity gala. As they returned home, Tayo's phone buzzed on the table. Nia glanced at it and saw the message that froze her heart: teach her a lesson. It was from his mistress. Before she could even breathe, his hand flew across her face. The sharp sound filled the marble halls, louder than any argument they'd ever had. She didn't cry out or run. She simply stood still, her cheek burning, her heart breaking. Then, in a quiet voice that carried more strength than anger, she whispered, "Thank you for showing me who you are." That night, as Tayo slept beside her, snoring like nothing had happened, Nia lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. A single tear slid down her face, not from pain but from realization. The man she loved was gone, replaced by someone cruel and small. She wiped her tears, her expression hardening. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't beg. Instead, she would wait, watch, and plan. In that silence, something inside her changed forever. That slap didn't break her, it woke her up. And from that moment, her revenge began to take shape. Days passed, then weeks, and Nia played her part perfectly. To everyone, she was still the loving wife, the calm, smiling woman who stood by her husband's side no matter what. She cooked his favorite meals, greeted him at the door, and even laughed at his jokes during dinner parties. She made sure the staff saw nothing unusual, and even Tayo believed everything was back to normal. He thought that slap had broken her, that he had finally shown her who was in control. But behind her soft smiles and gentle eyes, Nia was working on something he could never imagine. Every morning, she kissed him goodbye like a loyal wife, but as soon as his car disappeared down the driveway, her real day began. She met with lawyers, financial advisors, and trusted old friends from her late father's business circle. Her father had once built an empire of his own, and though Nia never needed to use that power, she knew it was still there, waiting. Quietly, she began moving pieces like a chess player preparing for checkmate. She transferred important files, made copies of confidential documents, and collected signatures that would one day turn everything in her favor. Each signature was a weapon. Each account she discovered was another brick in the wall she was building around Tayo's empire. When she wasn't meeting her lawyer, she spent hours in her study, her laptop glowing late into the night. She studied Tayo's business records, investment portfolios, and secret accounts he thought she knew nothing about. He had always underestimated her, assuming she was too soft, too polite, too naive to understand business. That was his first mistake. Nia knew everything: how his money moved, who his partners were, even which accounts were hidden under fake names. And slowly, without anyone noticing, she began shifting control. Tayo was too busy flaunting his mistress to see what was happening. He'd walk past Nia, smug and self-satisfied, thinking she was broken. He didn't see the quiet strength behind her eyes. He didn't notice that she no longer asked questions about his schedule or looked hurt when he ignored her. She acted like she didn't care, and he believed her. That was her greatest advantage, his arrogance. At night, when he came home from parties with lipstick on his collar, Nia would smile, hand him a glass of wine, and listen to him boast about his success. He didn't realize she was already taking it all away from him, piece by piece. Every document she signed, every file she transferred, was another step toward his downfall. To the world, Nia Mbeki looked like the perfect wife, quiet, loyal, forgiving. But behind that perfect act, she was becoming something far more dangerous. She was no longer just the woman he hit. She was the woman who would own everything he thought was his. And by the time he found out, it would already be too late. Lindai was everything Nia wasn't: young, bold, and shameless. She walked into Tayo's life like a storm, demanding attention wherever she went. She loved the flash of cameras, the smell of money, and the sound of her own name whispered in luxury circles. But most of all, she loved control. To her, Tayo wasn't a man to love, he was a ladder to climb. She wanted his mansion, his cars, his title, and the power that came with being Mrs. Mbeki. And she was willing to destroy anyone standing in her way, especially Nia. Late at night, when Tayo and Lindai lay together, she would whisper poison into his ear. "Divorce her," she'd say softly, tracing her nails down his chest. "She's weak, just like her little charity projects. You deserve better. You deserve someone powerful, like me." Her voice dripped with confidence, and Tayo, blinded by her beauty and flattery, began to believe her. He convinced himself that Nia was boring, too proper, too quiet. Lindai made him feel alive, important, adored, and that illusion was enough to push him further into her trap. Soon, Tayo stopped hiding the affair. He took Lindai to public events, holding her hand where cameras could see. The same photographers who once chased pictures of him and Nia now captured him smiling beside his mistress. Gossip columns exploded with stories about the new it couple. Nia's name was dragged through whispers and pity. Tayo didn't care. He was too busy proving to the world that he had moved on. He thought humiliating her would make him look powerful. Instead, it only made him look cruel. At dinners and charity events, Lindai would mock Nia with little smirks and fake pity. "You're such an inspiration," she'd say sweetly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I don't know how you keep smiling through everything." Nia would just nod, her eyes calm and unreadable. She never raised her voice, never argued, never showed pain. But inside, every insult, every public humiliation, was fuel. She stored it quietly, turning her pain into patience. Tayo mistook her silence for weakness. He didn't notice how often she disappeared into her study, or how she no longer asked about his business trips. He didn't see the calm calculation behind her soft smile. Lindai thought Nia was finished, a broken, outdated wife clinging to a dying marriage. What neither of them knew was that Nia was already steps ahead. Every cruel word they spoke, every public embarrassment they caused, only made her stronger. While they flaunted their love in front of cameras, she was finalizing her plans in secret. Her revenge was almost complete. Nia didn't need to fight them or shout to the world about her pain. She was letting them dig their own graves, one public appearance at a time. Because when she finally struck back, it wouldn't just hurt their pride, it would destroy everything they had built together. By the end of the year, Nia's plan was no longer just an idea, it was reality. She had spent months working quietly, moving carefully, and playing her part so well that no one suspected a thing. Tayo still believed he was the king of his empire, while his real power was slipping right through his fingers. What he didn't know was that every document he ignored, every paper he signed without reading, had brought him one step closer to losing everything. Nia used her intelligence like a weapon, never rushing, never leaving a trace. She had help from people who once worked with her late father, old businessmen who respected his name and trusted her quiet strength. Through a web of silent partners, secret accounts, and perfectly timed deals, she began buying up small portions of Tayo's company shares. One by one, they were sold off to people connected to her father's trust. No one noticed, because each move looked innocent, just another market trade. Tayo never imagined his wife was the one behind it all. He thought she was too busy organizing charity galas and playing the obedient spouse to understand his complex business. He couldn't have been more wrong. Every time he smiled at his mistress, bragging about his success, Nia was in her lawyer's office signing papers that slowly transferred control of the company to herself. By the time the final deal went through, she had quietly purchased 51% of the shares. It meant she now owned the majority of his empire. The contracts were clean, legal, and completely airtight. On the same day Tayo booked a luxury trip to Dubai with Lindai, Nia made a different kind of appointment, a private meeting with the company's board of directors. She walked into the room dressed in a simple white suit, calm and confident, every step echoing with purpose. The men around the table looked surprised. They had always seen her as the boss's quiet wife, someone who smiled politely and stayed out of business matters. But that day, they saw someone entirely new. When she slid the documents across the table, silence filled the room. The signatures were all there, stamped and verified. She was now the majority shareholder, the true owner of Mbeki Holdings. Some of the directors exchanged shocked looks, others smiled with quiet respect. For years, they had underestimated her. Now, they stood to report to her. When the meeting ended, the chairman, a man who once refused to even shake her hand, said softly, "Congratulations, Madam Chair." Nia smiled for the first time in months, not the practiced smile she used for the world, but a real one. While Tayo sipped champagne with his mistress on a flight to Dubai, Nia sat in her office, signing her first executive order as the new head of his empire. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that the woman he once slapped now owned everything he had ever built. Nia knew the time had come to end the game. For months, she had watched in silence while Tayo flaunted his affair and mocked her in public. She had built her plan carefully, step by step, and now everything was ready. All she needed was one final move, one evening that would expose them both for who they really were. So she sent a polite message to Tayo, asking him and Lindayo to join her for dinner, to talk. Her tone was calm, almost warm, as if she wanted peace. Tayo showed the message to Lindayo, and she burst out laughing. "She's finally begging you to take her back," she sneered. "Poor thing can't live without you." They both agreed to go, thinking it would be fun to watch Nia break down in front of them. That night, the table was beautifully set. Candles glowed, the air smelled of roses, and soft music played in the background. Nia looked stunning, her hair neatly tied, her eyes calm but unreadable. When Tayo and Lindayo arrived, they were caught off guard. She welcomed them with a smile, poured them wine, and asked them to sit. There was no anger in her voice, no sadness, just a quiet confidence that made the room feel heavy. They didn't know that hidden behind one of the flower vases was a small camera, and under the table was a voice recorder capturing every word. Two members of the board, seated quietly at the far end, acted as witnesses. At first, the conversation was light. Tayo tried to act smug, joking about how grown-up it was of Nia to invite them. Lindayo smirked, tossing her hair, pretending to be gracious. But Nia knew exactly what she was doing. She steered the conversation carefully, asking small questions that led to bigger truths. She spoke about the past, about the night of the slap, and about what really happened. Lindayo couldn't help herself. Her pride got the better of her. "Oh, that?" Lindayo said with a laugh, leaning back in her chair. "I told him to do it. He needed to show you who's in charge. It made him stronger." The room went silent. Even Tayo froze for a second, his eyes darting to Nia's calm face. Nia didn't shout or cry. She simply picked up her wine glass, took a slow sip, and said softly, "Thank you for the confession." Lindayo frowned, confused, until she noticed the faint red light blinking from the flower vase. Her smile faded. The two men at the end of the table quietly stood up, and one of them said, "That will be all, Madam Chair." Tayo's face turned pale. His hand trembled. He realized too late that the woman he once thought was weak had just destroyed him in one dinner. As Nia walked out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Tayo sat frozen, his empire, and his pride, crumbling right before his eyes. The morning after the dinner, Johannesburg woke up to chaos. Every major newspaper, every online headline, and every news channel carried the same shocking story: Mbeki Group under investigation for domestic violence and corporate fraud. Tayo's name was everywhere. His perfect image, the powerful businessman, the loving husband, the respected community leader, was gone in an instant. Nia had released everything: the video from that dinner, the audio confession, copies of secret bank transfers, and proof of the company's hidden accounts. There was no way out. The truth was finally out for the whole world to see. Reporters gathered outside their mansion, cameras flashing as police cars drove up the driveway. Employees at Mbeki Holdings were in shock. Investors panicked and froze all of Taeyo's accounts. Meetings were cancelled, deals collapsed, and partners started calling, demanding answers he didn't have. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, but every call was bad news. The empire he had built over decades crumbled in just a few hours. Lindai, the woman who once called herself his future, disappeared the moment things turned ugly. Her phone was off, her apartment empty, and her social media deleted. The same woman who pushed him to betray his wife vanished without a word when the police came looking for her. Taeyo was left alone, no mistress to defend him, no friends to protect him, and no money he could reach. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. Real fear. That afternoon, Nia walked into his office, the one that used to be his throne. The staff who once greeted Taeyo with respect now stepped aside when Nia entered. She wore a black suit, simple but powerful, her expression calm. Taeyo sat behind his desk, eyes red and tired, staring at the newspaper on the table. He looked up as she walked in, guilt and anger mixing in his face. "You did this," he said in a broken voice. "No," she replied softly, standing in front of him. "You did this to yourself." There was no hatred in her tone, only truth. She handed him a single envelope, his termination letter. Inside was also a note from the board confirming her position as chairwoman of Mbeki Holdings. The company was officially hers. Taeyo lowered his head, unable to speak. For years, he had controlled everything, the business, the money, even her life. Now, he couldn't control anything, not even his own name. Nia looked at him one last time, not as a victim but as a woman who had taken back her power. "I warned you the night you hit me," she said quietly. "You showed me who you are. I just showed the world." Then she turned and walked away, leaving him sitting in silence, surrounded by the ruins of his own empire. The once mighty Taeyo Mbeki was no longer a man of power, only a man defeated by the woman he thought was weak. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the seats, cameras flashed, and whispers echoed through the hall. Taeyo Mbeki sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hands shaking. He looked nothing like the confident businessman he once was. The scandal had stripped him of everything, his money, his respect, his power. But still, he tried to look strong. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up and began his act. "She ruined my life," he said loudly, pointing at Nia. "She planned everything to destroy me. She's not a victim, she's the reason I lost everything." His voice cracked halfway through, but he kept talking, desperate to make someone believe him. The judge listened silently, his face calm. When Taeyo finished, the judge turned to Nia. She stood gracefully, dressed in a simple cream suit, her head held high. She didn't shout back. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at Taeyo, then at the judge, her voice soft but steady. "Your Honor," she said, "I don't want a divorce." The courtroom gasped. Even Taeyo looked up, confused. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You don't?" he asked. Nia shook her head slowly. "No, Your Honor. Let him remain my husband, only in name. He can keep the title, but I'll own everything that truly matters. The company, the house, the cars, the legacy, all of it belongs to me now. Let him wake up every day knowing that the woman he tried to destroy owns his world." A long silence followed. Even the reporters stopped whispering. Taeyo's face went pale as her words sank in. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His hands covered his face, and for the first time, he began to cry. The gavel struck, sealing the court's decision. It was over. Nia had won, not just legally, but completely. After the hearing, as they left the courtroom, people stared. Some pitied Taeyeo, others admired Nia. She walked past him without looking back, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. He followed behind her, broken and silent, like a ghost. That night, they returned to the mansion, the same one where he had once slapped her. But now, everything was different. His office belonged to her. His staff answered to her. His name might still be on the mailbox, but his power was gone. He ate at her table, slept in her house, and lived under her rules. Every corner of that home reminded him of what he had lost. Sometimes, he would see her walking through the halls, confident and calm, and he would look away in shame. Nia didn't need to scream or seek revenge through violence. Her silence was punishment enough. She had taken back her life, her pride, and everything he thought he owned. The man who once hit her now lived as her shadow, trapped in the empire she built from his downfall. Months passed, and the storm finally settled. Nia had become a name everyone in Johannesburg respected. The woman once known only as Taeyeo Mbeki's wife was now her own legacy. She reopened her charity foundation, but this time it had a new purpose, to help women who had suffered abuse and needed a second chance. The launch event was beautiful, filled with light, laughter, and strength. Cameras flashed as Nia gave her speech, her voice calm but full of power. She spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor. And when it was time to announce the first donation, the audience gasped. It came from the Mbeki Holdings Trust, now fully under her name. The empire that once broke her was now funding her mission to rebuild others. After the event, a reporter asked her the question everyone wanted to know. "Mrs. Mbeki, why didn't you send your husband to prison?" Nia smiled softly, her eyes gentle but sharp. "Because prison would make him forget," she said. "Living with his failure makes him remember." The crowd went silent. That line spread across social media within hours, turning into headlines and viral posts. People admired her grace, she had punished him without cruelty, and that made her victory even more powerful. Back at the mansion, Taeyeo lived like a ghost. Every corner of the house reminded him of his downfall. Her portraits hung proudly on the walls, her name printed on every document, every business card, every newspaper article. Each time he saw her name, he felt the weight of that one night, the slap that ended his life and began hers. Nia didn't just survive. She triumphed. And her silence, her calm, her smile, that was her last, perfect laugh.